The most dangerous wrath isn't the one that screams, but the one that waits patiently in the silence for the perfect moment. Experience the gripping tales of calculated revenge and the ultimate price of betrayal. Subscribe now and watch the silent storm finally break on screen.
My mother always said the house ran on love. What she meant was it ran on me. I was the one who set the alarm for 5047 every morning, 14 minutes before anyone else stirred, so I could start the coffee and pack my brother's lunch before he woke up complaining there was nothing to eat. I was the one who picked up the dry cleaning on Thursdays, who scheduled the HVAC inspection, who remembered that my father's blood pressure prescription needed a refill every 28 days, not 30. I was the logistics department of a household that never once thanked me for keeping the lights on. My brother's name is Derek. He is 31 years old, 2 years older than me, and the only thing he has ever been reliably good at is spending money that doesn't belong to him. He lost his first job out of college for showing up late so many times that his manager stopped writing warnings and just handed him a box. He lost the second one for reasons my parents described as a misunderstanding and never elaborated on. By the time he was 26, he had cycled through 4 apartments, 2 cars that were repossessed, and a small business loan that evaporated so completely, my parents pretended it had never existed. At family dinners, my father still called him the entrepreneur. My mother still cut the crusts off his sandwiches when she made them. I paid rent. I paid my own car insurance. I paid for my own graduate school applications, my own work wardrobe, my own everything. And for 2 years, I had also been quietly, steadily, paying into a joint savings account that my mother had opened when I was 19 and had asked me to contribute to for family emergencies. $47,000. That was what was in it by the time I turned 29. I want you to understand something. I did not build that account because I was generous. I built it because I believed the way you believe things when you are young and still think fairness is a system rather than a lottery, that it would be there if I needed it. That it was mine in any meaningful sense of the word. I found out it wasn't on a Tuesday in March at 11:14 in the morning when I tried to transfer $6,000 to cover a security deposit on an apartment I was finally moving into. 30 minutes away from the house I had lived in my entire adult life. My own place, my own walls, my own mornings without anyone else's coffee preferences mattering. The transfer failed. I refreshed the page. It failed again. I called the bank. The account balance was $412. I sat very still for a moment. The kind of still that isn't calm. It's the opposite of calm. It's what happens when your body hasn't caught up to what your brain is telling it yet. Can you tell me when the last transaction was processed? I asked the woman on the phone. She told me, 11 days ago, a wire transfer, $46,200, moved to an external account I didn't recognize. I knew the account number though. I had seen it on the corner of a bank statement sitting on the kitchen counter 3 months before when I was looking for a pen and moved a stack of papers. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. It was my brother's. I didn't say anything to my parents that day. I didn't say anything for 4 days. I want to be clear about why. It was not because I was afraid of their reaction, though I had a good guess what it would be. It was because in those 4 days I did several things very carefully and in a very specific order. First, I called the bank back and requested a complete transaction history going back 2 years, sent to my personal email address. I also requested confirmation in writing that the wire transfer had been authorized by a joint account holder, my mother, as it turned out, and that it had been processed without my knowledge or consent. The bank representative was very helpful. I was very polite. I wrote down her name. Second, I called a friend of mine from law school, someone who had gone into estate and family law, and I asked her a question. Not for advice, just a question. The question was, if a joint account holder moves funds without the other holder's knowledge, and those funds are moved to a third party for the third party's personal benefit, what is that called? She was quiet for a second. That's called a lot of things, she said. Depending on the circumstances, it could be civil theft, it could be conversion. If there's any argument that you were deceived into contributing to the account under false pretenses, you're looking at fraud. I thanked her. I told her I'd call her back. Third, I took screenshots of every deposit I'd ever made into that account, of the original account agreement, which I had a PDF copy of in my email from 2015, of the wire transfer confirmation, of my brother's name on the receiving account. I put them in a folder on my personal laptop and I named the folder February, even though it was March. Because if my mother ever looked over my shoulder, I didn't want anything to be obvious. On the 5th day, I went downstairs for dinner. My mother had made pot roast. My brother was at the table on his phone, showing no sign of anything. My father asked how work was. I said fine. I passed the bread. We talked about the weather, about a neighbor's dog, about a TV show my mother was watching. After dinner, I helped clear the table. My mother was at the sink and I stood beside her and I said very calmly, I tried to transfer money from the joint account last week. It was almost empty. She didn't look up from the dishes. Derek needed it, she said. Those 3 words. Said the way you say the sky is blue or Tuesday follows Monday. A fact of the universe. Derek needed it. That was my money, I said. It was a family account, she said. I put $47,000 into that account over 10 years, I said. Derek hasn't contributed a single deposit in at least 3 years. I have the records. She set down the pan she was rinsing. She turned to look at me with the expression I had been seeing my entire life. The one that said I was being difficult, that I was making something out of nothing, that my feelings were an inconvenience being presented as a crisis. He's trying to get back on his feet, she said. You have a good job. You'll rebuild it. And there it was. I nodded slowly. I said, okay. I went back upstairs. I called my friend from law school. What followed was not fast or dramatic. I want to be honest about that. There was no single moment where everything exploded. What there was instead was a series of very quiet decisions made over the following 3 weeks. I withdrew my name from the joint account, which I was legally entitled to do. I had the bank send a formal letter to my home address, addressed to me, confirming the closure of my interest in the account. I had it sent certified mail, so there would be a signature record. I filed a small claims case for the amount transferred without my consent. My friend helped me draft the language. We were specific. We had dates, amounts, account numbers, written confirmation from the bank. We named my mother as the respondent because she was the one who had authorized the wire. I also, and this part matters, stopped doing everything. Not dramatically. I didn't make an announcement. I just stopped. I stopped refilling my father's prescription and left a note on the counter with the pharmacy number and his doctor's name in case he had forgotten it. I stopped scheduling the quarterly pest control visit and left the company's magnet on the fridge where it had always been. I stopped forwarding the utility bills I had been managing online since my parents had trouble with the website 3 years ago and sent my mother a password reset link to her email with a short note saying I was simplifying my accounts. I also, quietly, found a new apartment, different from the one I had been planning. Smaller, slightly farther out but available immediately with a lower deposit. I signed the lease on a Wednesday morning. I gave my employer my new address that afternoon. My mother noticed some of the changes before I moved out. She mentioned the pest control. She mentioned that she had gotten a letter from the bank and didn't understand it. She did not mention the $47,000 or the small claims filing which she had been formally served with 8 days earlier. I assumed she was waiting to deal with it the way she dealt with everything inconvenient, which was to hope it would resolve itself. Derek said nothing to me directly, which was not surprising. Derek had never been good at direct anything. My father asked me once, toward the end of that 3rd week, whether everything was okay. He said I seemed quiet. I told him I was tired from work. He nodded and went back to the TV. I moved out on a Saturday. I took what was mine. My furniture, my kitchen things, my books. I left the house key on the counter with a note that had my new address and phone number on it, in case of emergency. I left early in the morning, before anyone was up, because I did not want a conversation and I did not owe one. I was unpacking boxes in my new living room that afternoon when my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go too. The 3rd call I answered, because I was raised to answer the phone and some habits are slower to leave than others. You took the good pot, she said. This was, apparently, the most urgent matter. I told her it was my pot, that I had bought it myself 2 years ago. I mentioned the brand and the receipt I still had in my email, in case there was any confusion. There was a pause. What is this letter from a court, she said. It's a small claims filing, I said, for the money that was transferred out of our joint account without my consent. Another pause. Longer. You're suing your own mother. I'm seeking civil remedy for funds that were moved without my authorization, I said. The bank has confirmed the transaction details. I have records of every deposit I made. Derek needed that money for his business, she said, and her voice had shifted into something harder. After everything we've done for you, after everything this family has given you. I thought about the 5,047 alarm, the dry cleaning, the prescriptions, the 10 years of deposits into an account I had apparently never really owned. I know what this family has given me, I said. I also know what I've given this family. I have records of that too. She said several more things. I listened to all of them. When she was finished, I said, I'll see you at the hearing, and I ended the call. I want to tell you what happened at the hearing because that part is important, and because a lot of people assume these things get messy and loud and that the person in the right still somehow loses. My mother arrived with Derek. She had a folder of papers that, as far as I could tell from a distance, was mostly bank statements she had printed at home. Derek was wearing a collared shirt, which was unusual enough that I noticed it. I arrived with my friend, who was there as a witness and not as my attorney because you cannot have attorneys in small claims. I had a binder. It was organized by date. It had tabs. The magistrate was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the expression of someone who had heard every possible version of every possible family dispute and was not going to be moved by any of them. My mother spoke first. She explained that the account was a family account, that the money was contributed by the whole family, that Derek had a need, that I had always been well taken care of and had no reason to make this into something larger than it was. When it was my turn, I did not explain my feelings. I did not talk about the pot roast dinners or the 5047 alarm or the way my mother looked at me when I tried to tell her something was wrong. None of that was relevant to the magistrate. What was relevant was the account agreement, which established that both parties had equal rights to the funds, but that neither party could authorize a transfer exceeding a documented threshold without dual consent. What was relevant was the bank's written confirmation that the wire transfer had been authorized by one party only and that the receiving account belonged to a third party with no legal interest in the account. What was relevant was 10 years of deposit records, showing that $41 of the $47,000 had come from my paycheck. The magistrate looked at the documents for a long time. She asked my mother one question: "Were you aware that the account agreement required dual authorization for transfers of this amount?" My mother said she hadn't read that part carefully. The magistrate wrote something down. The judgment was in my favor. Not for the full amount, because some of the funds had technically been deposited during a period when the account terms were different, and the magistrate was precise about that, but for $38,400 plus filing fees. My mother stood up so quickly her chair scraped back. "This is your own family," she said, not to the magistrate, to me. I looked at her. I had been prepared for this moment, or I thought I had been, and it turned out preparation doesn't really cover the way it feels to sit across a table from your mother in a municipal building and watch her look at you like you are a stranger who has done her harm. "I know," I said. Derek didn't say anything. He was looking at the floor. My mother and I walked out in opposite directions. She called twice more in the following week. The first call I answered. She wanted to know if I would consider dropping the judgment in exchange for a payment plan. I said the judgment was already filed and that the payment plan was between her and the court. She said I was cold. She said I had changed. She said she didn't know who I was anymore. I told her I was the same person I had always been. I told her that was actually the problem for a long time and that it wasn't going to be a problem anymore. She hasn't called since. That was 4 months ago. Derek texted me once, about 6 weeks after the hearing, a message that said simply, "Was that necessary?" I read it. I did not respond. There was nothing in it that was actually a question. My father sent me an email, which surprised me because my father rarely emails anyone. It was 3 sentences. He said he missed me at Sunday dinners. He said he didn't fully understand what had happened. He said he hoped I was doing okay. I wrote back. I told him I was doing well. I told him I had a new apartment with a kitchen I liked and a window that faced east and that the light in the mornings was very good. I told him I hoped he was taking his blood pressure medication. I left my door open without saying so in so many words, because he had not been the one to take anything from me, and I was trying to be precise about where I placed things. He wrote back one line: "East-facing windows are the best kind." I have thought about that a lot since. There is a version of this story where I am the villain. I know that. My mother would tell it very differently. In her version, I am ungrateful, litigious, cold, someone who chose paperwork over family. In her version, Derek has a dream and I had the means to help, and I chose not to. And isn't that its own kind of theft, stealing possibility from someone who needed it? I have tried to hold her version of the story with some care, because I think you have to do that, or you become someone you don't want to be. But here is what I know. I know that I deposited money into that account for 10 years because I was told it was for emergencies and I trusted that. I know that when I needed it, it was gone. I know that nobody asked me first and nobody apologized after, and when I asked what had happened, the answer I got was 3 words that were supposed to explain everything and explained nothing. He needed it. The thing about being needed is that it can be real or it can be a story someone tells about you to justify taking from you. Sometimes it takes a long time to learn to tell the difference. I have my apartment now. The kitchen is small, but it is mine, and nobody is going to drain it while I'm not looking. The east window is everything my father guessed it would be. In the mornings, I drink my coffee at the time I choose, which is 7:15, which is the time I actually wake up, which it turns out is very different from the time I was trained to wake up for everyone else. I don't think I'm cold. I think I finally stopped performing warmth that was never returned and mistaking the exhaustion of that performance for love. I didn't ruin my family. I just stopped holding it together long enough for everyone to see what was always underneath.